Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and this is not a first impressions video. We've already done a first impressions video of this, and then we've also done a first impressions video of the Eduard one. So I thought in this video it'd be quite interesting to compare the two kits, as they're pretty much the same aircraft, and take a view on which one is possibly the better one to go for. So let's take a look. In the UK, the Tamiya kit is going to cost you on average about £32. So it's by no means an expensive kit to purchase. The Eduard kit, however, would cost you around about £16.50 in the UK. But if you bought the weekend edition, it would be even cheaper than that. It'd be around about £10. So we're going to base this on the Profi Pack one because that has the some of the etching that we reviewed in the kit. So let's have a closer look. So let's start with the instructions, which is where I usually start on a first impressions video. Is there much different in the instructions? Well, let's be honest. Both of these instructions get you where you need to be. You can build your kit from them. There's no real issues. Both of them are good quality instructions. So the two models build up in a slightly different way. But essentially, where they are the same, they're saying the same things. So you can see here, building up the inside of the wings. And then you can see the upper wings going on. The difference is there is more parts for the Tamiya, and the instructions would suggest more detail, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. The Tamiya instructions are definitely more involved. There's drilling to be done and trimming to be done, or at least it's showing you clearly what needs to be removed. Whereas there is a little bit of drilling to be done, but it's not quite as much. But both of the instructions are clear. Overall, the Tamiya instructions are just that bit more busy, and that's because they've got a slightly smaller page, and because they are putting a little bit more into the steps. But if we come to this here, Eduard are just putting the wheels in, and one piece of photo etch and a couple of tiny bits on the wing in this one step, whereas Tamiya, they've got multiple parts going in. So it's the same bits on the wings, no photo etch obviously, the wheels going in, but they're also showing you how to fit them and where to clear up. So they're more busy because there's more detail. So I think we can clearly say that Tamiya's instructions are more detailed, but Eduard's instructions are probably easier to read. Not that there's much in it really. Tamiya take 37 steps to build their kit. Eduard don't actually tell you, they don't number their steps, but I calculated about 23, 24, depending on how you count the little sub-assemblies, and that's excluding the resin build-up, which wouldn't normally be as part of the instructions or included in the kit if you've got the Profi Pack. When it comes to decal markings, I have to say I prefer Eduard's layout. There's more space, which you've got the coloured numbers, it's giving you options, it's very clear, and it's in colour. I just prefer it. The Tamiya one again feels crammed, and again it's partly because of their page size. Though there's nothing wrong with it, it's clear to follow. But that just looks easier to read, doesn't it? Now, when you look closely at the markings, it's quite interesting. Both of them have put stencils on that the other hasn't. So for example, all these number markings here included by Tamiya, not included by Eduard. But then Eduard have got some markings like this one here that Tamiya haven't included. And where they have got the same marking, they're not always in the same place. So S67 here is in a slightly different location than 84 there, which is the same decal, just a bit higher up if you're on the Tamiya kit. So there is a need for a little bit of research to make sure what is right. But fundamentally, most markings are covered by both manufacturers. So in terms of the instructions, I wouldn't say that you can see a justifiable difference for the Tamiya kit being twice the price at this stage. When we come to the painting instructions, however, you can absolutely see a difference. So they both have separate colour sheets. They both go with the same approach of showing the spinner, the top, the bottom and the two side profiles. So there's no difference in the approach except for Tamiya have made theirs to scale. That means you can make templates from their instructions. That is definitely much better than what Eduard are doing. But other than that, you've got to say there ain't much difference. They shout out Tamiya colours, they shout out a brand of colours. The RLM number is given by Eduard, but not by Tamiya. But otherwise, I would say there isn't much in them. However, I much prefer how Tamiya have gone about it. Even though it means that they've had to fold it in 4 and you've got fold lines across it, the fact that it's to scale is a really lovely touch that can be really helpful, particularly when you've got complex camouflage patterns that you might want to build masks for, which would be my intention. So the next thing to logically look at is the decals themselves. Both kits come with 2 sets of decals. In the Eduard case, you'd say that you've got one set that is all the stencils, and then a second set which is the markings specific to the paint options that you've got with the kit. In Tamiya's case, that's not really as clear cut. You've got some stencils and then some markings for the kit, and then on the other sheet you've got some stencils and some markings for the kit. So both of those, I mean, that could have been one sheet for me. That easily could have been one sheet. It would have fitted in the box. So why we've got 2, not quite sure. However, that being said, it's not really an issue. I am covering up the swastikas. Both of them have given you swastikas. Eduard have an option here for build-up swastikas. I imagine they trim this off for the market, so that there's not always swastikas in the box. Anyway, in terms of colour and register, and some of you will know that I recently had issues with Eduard decals. On this surface of things, everything looks to be okay with both of them. Both of them are providing dashboard decals. I've got to say that I think I prefer Tamiya's approach than Eduard's approach when it comes to the various dials. And in terms of size and scaling, if you look at the 2 together, there's no difference in size whatsoever. What we do see is that the Eduard ones are a bit glossier than the Tamiya ones. Now, what I can see, and I don't know whether that's coming across on camera, is that the Eduard decals are definitely a lot more glossy than the Tamiya ones. Now, that means that the Tamiya ones are probably a little bit more realistic, but most people would be gloss coating So that then disappears as an issue anyway. Certainly, as I feel them, the Tamiya ones are a lot thicker, and anyone that's built Tamiya kits will know that Tamiya's decals need just a little bit of extra coaxing sometimes to lay down the way you want them to. So as long as the register is correct, the Tamiya decals for me are a slightly better set of decals, but I wouldn't say there was much in it really. Both kits come with paint masks. Now the Tamiya one comes with paint masks that are printed onto a single sheet, and you're going to have to cut them out yourself. Some people love them, some people despise them, some people aren't bothered either way. The Eduard ones come as already die cut, so you just need to peel them off and put them on. Both manufacturers only supply a set for the exterior of the canopy. There is nothing for the interior of the canopy, so you're having to do all your painting from the outside, which means that in reality you end up with an artificially glossy interior, so that can cause a problem. Because you're painting on the outside of the canopy only, if I show you what I'm trying to say, if you paint, say the interior is grey, you paint the grey first and then you paint your outside colours on top so that the grey is shown through on the inside. That's all well and good, but you still get the glossiness of the unpainted plastic on the inside, and you'll have that issue with both of these kits. For me, I've used both successfully in the past. Having to cut them out, it's a bit more of a pain, but it's not a biggie. Having the die cut ones is certainly easier, but only if they fit. So I wouldn't say there was much between them, to be honest. So let's look at some plastic parts and compare them. This is quite interesting. So these are the clear parts. They're the Tamiya ones, they're the Eduard ones. Now the Eduard ones have all sorts in there that are for other kits, that different versions that we're not using. So there's more of them. The first thing that's noticeable is that they have approached the windscreens in a similar way. Both of them have included part of the body for painting in. Tamiya much more than Eduard, because Tamiya have included this front nose bit here, which is this matte bit. So all of that is to be painted, whereas Eduard have just a small amount there, but both of them have included side bits. The Tamiya windscreen is definitely taller than the Eduard one, so we have a dimensional difference. What's most interesting for me, however, is this opening part of the canopy. So this hinge is open, and there's a couple of hinges provided on the Tamiya one which you cut off if you're showing it in closed position. Now the moulding on this is much crisper, it's nicer, it's sharper than the Eduard one. But the Eduard one has all the fastenings on it, raised fastenings all the way around on all of the metal parts. Tamiya doesn't. Tamiya's is totally smooth. So actually the level of detail on the Eduard one is better, even though the moulding is better on the Tamiya one. The other thing that the Eduard one has, which the Tamiya one doesn't, is this little hole in the windscreen there, in that piece of glass. That's excluded on the Tamiya one. When we come to have a look at the rear section of glazing, it's very, very clear that Tamiya have done a much finer job than Eduard. Eduard's metalwork is much thicker, 3 times thicker than Tamiya's, if you look at that top line there. I also think that Tamiya's parts are clearer And in terms of distortion, I think Eduard's is better. So it's a right mixed bag there. Who would you pick? Just because the moulding is that much nicer, you'd pick Tamiya. But clearly, Eduard have an advantage in terms of detail. Interesting. Okay, gonna have a look at the fuselage halves. Now, they appear different because Tamiya have much more of the fuselage as individual parts to be built up. And Tamiya include an engine which Eduard don't. So they have all sorts of options for showing that engine off, whereas Eduard are just going to cover it up. And that's part of the reason why their kit's cheaper, because there's less of the kit actually. Now then, if we have a look at the two fuselage halves, the first thing that strikes you is that there is a lot more detail on the Eduard fuselage. There is panel lines on the Tamiya one, and there are some of the major noticeable things on the fuselage. So we've got the little foot stirrup there, which is depressed into it there, and we have this little round panel here with its fastening points, and so on and so forth. And we can see that Eduard have done exactly the same, but Eduard have included all of the rivets, and Tamiya have included none of them. So immediately I'm going that the Eduard is a better rendition of the aircraft, because we've got lots and lots and lots of detail on there that Tamiya just have not bothered with. Having said that, some of the detail appears to be crisper on the Tamiya one. It's slightly more softly moulded on the Eduard one, and some of it is slightly oversized compared to the Tamiya one, but there is not much in it, and I'm going to be honest, I much prefer the look of the Eduard one than the Tamiya one. So let's see if that follows through in other areas as well. So when we come to the tail, Tamiya's tail is much nicer. There's more detail in it than the Eduard one. The Eduard has these thick lines. The Tamiya one has lines with little indentations in. It just looks more the part. Apologies for the light, the sun keeps coming out, and there's not much I can do about it. The other thing that Tamiya does have that Eduard doesn't have is a pilot. So there's no pilot included in the Eduard kit, and that's a little bit annoying. And that theme of less detail follows through with the other parts that for this main fuselage on Tamiya. So these panels here, none of them have all of this lovely rivet detail that Eduard are picking out. It's just not there at all. The panel lines are there, but nothing else. When we come to look at this, the section that sits on the top of the nose with the little machine guns coming in, we've got the hinge detail from Tamiya, whereas Eduard, we have some little strips because the hinge is a photo etch item that goes in. So obviously that's got all the rivet detail on, and various bits and pieces that the Tamiya one doesn't have. So when we look at the wings, that continues again. There is lots and lots and lots of rivet detail. Every single riveted panel is captured on the Eduard model. None of it is on the Tamiya model at all. The bulges in the wings on the Eduard one are probably slightly overscale, but for me the Eduard wing is head and shoulders above the Tamiya one. Now surprisingly, Tamiya try and make a comeback with the underside of the wing. So the part of the aircraft that's going to most likely be seen the least by anybody looking at the completed model, because it's the bit facing down, is the bit that they decided to put rivet detail on. So you explain to me why they did that. We're not going to put rivet detail on the fuselage, we're not going to put rivet detail on the upper wings, but we'll put some on the lower wings that no one's going to see. Having said that, Eduards still have more detail when it comes to the riveting, and even if some of it might be slightly oversized, it's there, which is better than not there. And for me, underneath the wings still looks considerably better on the Eduard kit. Looking at the drop tanks now, there's not much between them, to be honest. I think Tamiya slightly have the edge in terms of the amount of detail and how they've captured the detail. There's not a lot in it, but if I had to choose one of the tanks to put on my model, it would be the Tamiya one. It's got little bits and pieces that the Eduard one just doesn't quite have. So I'm just looking at these parts now that cover the landing gear when they're in the up position. And one thing that's noticeable is the Eduard ones are slightly longer, so probably slightly inaccurate in terms of size. But again, Eduard have all the rivet detail on and Tamiya have none of it. If we flip them over, both manufacturers have put detail on the inside, and there's not much between it. I think you'd agree that Tamiya's probably ever so slightly has an edge in the fact that it looks like a sort of pressed sheet of metal, but you know, there's not much in it there really, is there? When we look at the tail wheel, I think Tamiya has done a better job of that compressed look there, but you've got a tyre that's moulded in, so you're relying on some painting skill there to make the support leg look like it's not attached to the wheel. But I think the detail is better on the Tamiya one than it is on the Eduard one. Having said that, Eduard have had a go, and it looks okay, but just not as good as Tamiya's. But I do prefer the separate wheel and the separate leg, because you don't have to use paint techniques to make that look separate, because it's separate. When we look at the exhaust, Tamiya's are nicely done. They've got the little seam on where it should be, and they're solid, so there's no open exhausts on there. When we look at Eduards, they've got the seam on as well, but they also have some relief on the end of each exhaust to make it look like it's open, and that looks much better than Tamiya's. When we come to look at the main landing gear tyres, we've got detail on the sidewalls, we've got detail of the tread, although we do have an option without tread. There's quite a heavy seam on them, and the tread does lighten up a little bit as it gets to the top, so it's correctable. When we look at, and they have no hubs obviously, so the hubs need to be put in, but that means that you can paint them separately. When we look at the Tamiya ones, we've got the rear of the hubs already in, and we have absolutely no sidewall detail on the tyres, no wording, but the outward face of the wheel hubs is separate for painting. So yeah, I mean, we commented on that when we did the first impressions. I think the level of detail is better on the Tamiya ones, with the exception of no tyre wall detail, which is a little bit of a pity, really. When we look at the dials on the Tamiya one, we can see there's lots of individual rings on what is otherwise a flat surface. So, I mean, it looks relatively busy. There's some little switches and bits and pieces there, and you put the decals on and it should look nice. Let's compare that with the Eduard one. And Eduard give you two. They give you a completely flat one for putting photo etch on, or this one that you can paint. And you can see the difference to the Tamiya one. Rather than it being a flat surface with the dials on, you've got the raised dials, but they're on the individual little square boxes that screw in, and you can see them. You can even see the screws. So the level of detail, again, is far superior to Tamiya. And of course, if you choose to build up the etch, that just brings it up another level again. Now, Tamiya's spinner was very cleverly moulded. The attachment points are underneath, really easy to clean up. Really love that. And you can see the little join on the front of the spinner there. There's a line that goes all the way around. When we look at the Eduard one, obviously we're going to have to clean up because they've gone for a more traditional way of attaching the part to the sprue. And you get the line there again. It's slightly more pronounced than the Tamiya one, but it's also got the fastener heads all the way around, which you don't get on the Tamiya one. And when it comes to the cockpit interior, it's a little bit difficult to judge in its unassembled form. What I would say is there's more individual parts in the Tamiya kit, and things like the control stick are better rendered in the Tamiya one. Some of the detail is a little bit finer. So I think overall the look of the cockpit is probably going to be better in the plastic form with Tamiya. The problem then arises with the fact that you get photo etch in the Profi Pack edition, which is the one that most people would buy, which gives you some extra detail for that dashboard. It gives you photo etched pedals, which will look much better than the plastic ones, although there's not much between both kits when it comes to the plastic. And you get little photo etched grills, which make their grills look better than the Tamiya ones. You also get included the harnesses. When we come to the engine, Tamiya knocks Eduard out of the water because Eduard didn't bother with one. So, when we compare the two kits, we're presented with a little bit of a conundrum. If we buy the Tamiya kit, we get lots of engine detail. We get the opportunity to show the aircraft with all the engines showing off. We also have the opportunity to show the aircraft in flight with a pilot. And we'll end up with a very well engineered kit that will be easy to build, and I have no doubt will go together without any major hurdles. So that is the Tamiya kit. The Eduard kit, I've got no pilot, and I've got no engine. But for most people, I suspect, buying this model and wanting to show the aircraft off without the engine uncovered, then what you're getting is a model that looks infinitely more detailed than the Tamiya one for half the money. Now, I have no doubt there will be one or two more construction challenges with the Eduard kit. It's not going to fall together like the Tamiya kit, but then if you're a model builder, that's part of the fun, isn't it? The Tamiya one is a more complete offering. So if I want to show the engine off and I really want a pilot, then the Tamiya is worth considering. But then you've also got to consider that the fuselage, especially if you're going to weather it, is not going to present you with anything like the level of finish that the Eduard one is. So if it was me, I would buy the Eduard one every time. So I'm not sure, is that a surprise to you? I'm going to be honest, it's a real surprise to me. When I did the first impressions video of the Eduard one, I did comment on all of the rivet detail. When I did the first impressions video on the Tamiya one, I focused on what was there rather than what wasn't there. You know, we talked about panel lines, we talked about the fact that you can see all the little things, we talked about how nicely moulded everything is, how crisp it is, how well presented it is, but we didn't talk about what was missing. And it's only when we've come to compare them that we can see there's so much missing from the Tamiya kit. And when you consider that you're paying twice as much, is it really worth it? So this is the second time I've reviewed a Tamiya kit and gone, actually, it's not as good as you think, is it? That's starting to surprise me a little bit, because everyone says Tamiya kits are the best. And I would agree that Tamiya kits are the best engineered, but I'm absolutely not sure that Tamiya kits are the best anymore. Well, that was a revelation. Thanks for looking in. Enjoy your modelling. Take care, everyone. And I will see you very soon.